Welcome to Conversing. I'm so glad today to be able to welcome Justin McRoberts as our guest on Conversing. Justin is an author, a coach, a speaker, a songwriter, and a friend. He is the author of 6 books, including the one that we're going to be focused on today, entitled Sacred Strides. Justin, welcome. We're so glad that you're here.
I am blessed. Glad to be here.
You know, we have known one another for about 15 years or so.
Yeah.
And over the course of that time, many of the stories that you tell in this book have unfolded. Some are before that time, of course, some in the last decade and a half. And one of the things that I've always admired about you greatly, I remember saying it to you the first time we met, was how much I am grateful for your use of language. So I'd like you to talk about the purpose of the book and why it was that you wrote this particular book. It's I think, a very significant set of stories and of ways of calling people to an understanding of their belovedness through work and through rest. But give us your take on how you got there and how the use of words figures into the purpose of the book.
I've taken to say about this book that I'm trying to do in 40,000 words what Parker Palmer has already done in about 40 words. Because
you're just enlarging the essay.
Yes, there's definitely value to it. I spent a lot of my time, honestly, doing the opposite, taking what would normally be like just verbose, I talk too much kind of thing, and boiling things down. It's been my primary practice in writing for the last 6 or 7 years. And because I value the power of language, both practices are urgent. So what Palmer says about the relationship between contemplation and action, or I'm calling them work and rest in the book, he says that they're both rooted in the same place. That contemplation and action, they're rooted in the same place, and then they return you to the same place. And that he says that place is feeling or being fully alive. I'm flipping some of those words into different words. Instead of saying contemplation and action, I'm saying work and rest. And instead of saying fully alive, I'm using the term belovedness, because I think there's a bunch to that. The reason I'm doing that is because it's one thing to say that contemplation and action are both rooted in the desire to be fully alive. I totally understand that that's true, and that resonates with my soul. That's part of the way human truth works, is when I hear it, my soul says, yes, that, exactly.
Yes.
Then my soul says, okay, but what? So what do I do with that? And so I've taken the time to march back through my own history and find the places where that truth has, either as a seed or as a tidal wave, shown up and had influence in my life, so that when I say that work and rest both stem from my belovedness and return me to my belovedness, this is what this has looked like. So it's not just a quote. It's not just it's not just a thought. It's actually a practiced and embodied truth.
Yes. The image that we use for this podcast is based on a painting that I did of a whirlwind. And when I think about your life and about many of the things that you've experienced, I think of whirlwind.
Yes.
But I also think of the other part of that image, which is that there's this, I think to some degree, somewhat subtle red line that goes through the whirlwind, which is really about, I think, what I would say in the language of today's conversation, our belovedness.
Yeah.
And in the middle of the whirlwind, there is belovedness. And
yes.
I think what you are doing such a good job of laying out through a whole series of stories is not only the stories, but then the nurturing, the contemplative extraction from the stories of things that are really valuable in our understanding of what to make of life and how to make of what to make of experience, which may seem completely unrelated to belovedness, but which in fact might be very, very near to belovedness. Can you just unpack that a bit more? Because I think it's a major theme of the book.
Sure. I'll actually borrow on the imagery too, insofar as the first thing I think of when you talk about the whirlwind imagery, specifically in regards to my life, I've generally resonated with Eugene Peterson. I think it's in the book, The Pastor. He says that building a church community or pastoring a church, it's like building a chicken coop in a windstorm, and that you're just grabbing whatever is flying by you and trying to nail it down as fast as you can. I've really resonated with that, and I get I get that. I get that energy. The thing is that red line of belovedness that runs through that image from my life is this: that in order to have the wherewithal to grab things and nail things down, I want to make something of, like, I'm in the windstorm. I'm in the whirlwind, which is to say I am not the whirlwind.
Yes. Right.
Right. I'm in it. I have to receive, like, my moment. Like, I'm here. I am not this thing. I get to, like, find some kind of, I'm going to be okay.
Yes.
So embracing my belovedness. If I am just freaking out about the whirlwind, about the windstorm, I'm not going to build well and wisely. So there's, in order to build something in the windstorm, which is what I want to do, I'm going to grab stuff and pin it down for me and for people around me. I have to have a sense I'm not the chaos around me. I'm not the whirlwind. I'm in the whirlwind, and I'm going to be okay. That's a sense of belovedness in rest. And then out of a sense of belovedness in work, I'm okay grabbing whatever's flying by. Like, I can do something with this.
Right.
Like, what is that thing?
Right.
I have no idea what that is. Let's pin that down. And in a sense of belovedness, I can build something regardless of whatever is flying by me. So I really resonate with that. That's 100% true. Like, what do you do with this? What do you do with, whether it's like the loss of my father earlier in life, whether it's the learning to pastor a church during one of the most volatile religious transitional periods in American religious history. What do you do with this? Well, the first part of it has always been like, I have to know that I'm okay.
Yes.
I have to know that I'm going to be cared for and center myself in that. And then I have the freedom, the confidence, and the wherewithal to do something with what I've been given.
Right, right. I remember years ago being in a situation where various men in this case were discussing the relationship between faith and work. And one of them happened to be a cardiologist. And someone asked him in the panel that he was on what it was like to tell people they were going to die. And he said, I thought one of the most remarkable things. He said, well, the first thing in a way that I tell myself is, I'm not going to die. Now, he means it in the more imminent sense. Of course, eventually he's going to die. But what he's saying is, okay, so I'm not going to die, which now allows me to have the opportunity to help a person who is going to die understand reality and have a chance with their family and in their life, their faith or non-faith, whatever it might be, to come to peace with this circumstance. And therefore, well, yes, of course, it's an extremely hard thing to do. It's also possible because I'm not, in your image, I'm not the whirlwind. I actually haven't created the condition that has perhaps caused or contributed to this person's heart condition, but I can help them understand it and understand the consequences of it. And I think that's similar to what it is that we're talking about, right? It felt like that's a distinguishing, differentiating freedom.
Yeah.
In his case, I think in humility, right? Not in neener, I'm not going to die, but in the humble sense of grasping reality and not trying to grasp something that's not real.
And there's an interplay there as well. In other words, as the person, whether you're talking about someone who's not going to die. It means like I've actually faced I've faced and dealt with my mortality, at least to some degree, in order to actually come to that as a reality. Like, I'm not dying right now. You're the one in that place. In order to feel okay, in order to build and make good work in the world, I do have to be working from a place of belovedness. Sometimes, and this has definitely been my case, I get to that place by doing the work and failing and doing the work and succeeding, that I come to a sense of my belovedness through work. I then embrace my belovedness, know that I'm beloved regardless of my successes, my failures, which then provides, this was my story, which then provides this space in which I can rest and not work. Right. And then that space in which I can rest and not work actually frees me up to work more diligently, more wisely, more well, to enjoy my successes and learn from them, to deal with my failures and learn from them, which then returns me again to a sense of like, well, I'm cared for and I'm beloved. There's an interplay between the two things over and over and over again. They continue to feed one another, which is part of why I wanted to do with the book, like, less of this is a book about rest or this is a book about work. It's a book about the transcendent experience of life that we actually achieve through both practices and in the rhythm between them, which is that transcendence I call belovedness.
Right. And it's reciprocating as opposed to linear. So it keeps, in a way, spinning inside and alongside and with the whirlwind, as it were, and the belovedness. That's just seems so valuable and so different than a kind of linearity that suggests if you've missed the train and you don't get everything in the right order, you're a lost cause, which I think is part of what is so defeating to a lot of people, because we are never, ever actually able to get into that position.
No, when it's the danger of talking about balance ever, is achieving work-life balance, or the way we tend to, which is the moment we're in right now, we tend to push back, at least in my circles. The pushback right now has to do with overwork and noting all the ways in which the whirlwind is impacting us, and that we're tired, that our mental health is affected. And so there's a rightful, to some degree, pushback against hustle culture and achievement orientedness. And that's not wrong. It's just not everything. Like, we'll have this moment, and we'll have this moment that's very important for a whole bunch of folks, particularly younger folks.
Right.
And then on the other side of this moment, my hope would be that this crowd of folks who are saying, like, I want a 4-day work week. Okay, cool. I want a 4-day work week. I only want to take jobs that are good for that I feel comfortable in, where I'm not triggered and I'm not set off, and are good for my mental health. Fantastic. You want to build a life in which you feel at home and in your body. Fantastic. I hope and would expect that a season of life, even broadly and culturally, in which we work to protect ourselves and achieve that sense of belovedness and rest, leads to a season in which we can take some serious risks as well, and to overextend ourselves, because part of living well and being fully alive is being fully rested. It's also being fully spent, because there's a sense of connectedness I have to myself, to the divine, and to the world around me, that I only achieve by being really well spent. I can achieve a certain kind of connectedness with myself, the divine, and others as a rested person. And there's an entirely different and equally rich and important experience of life in being fully spent. So spend the time, get well, protect yourself and your mental health, the whole nine. All the while knowing that sets you up for another season in your life in which that won't be the emphasis as well.
What strikes me about that is that there's a fine line, or not such a fine line sometimes, between that orientation, which can be, as some have recently been calling it, the self-curated life, where everything is not only about me, it's about my exact self. So it's getting everything to be completely curated for my well-being. And it is yet another advance, in quotes, of the hyper-individualized culture that we live in. So how does vocation fit into work and rest, in which I think what you're saying about the meaning of work and of being fully spent is in part meant to be fully spent in the work, not just meaning the job, of course, but meaning the work of our lives as a response to the vocation of what it means to be human, to be in relationship with others, etc. How do you respond to any of that?
I have slivers of wisdom here. The rest of it, I'm still working out too. But part of what I note in the critique, the broad cultural critique of hustle culture and work and achievement orientedness is it is oftentimes, somewhere between sometimes and oftentimes, about like the problem of working too much. It's almost, I'm going to just say something dangerous. Part of what I think folks are running into is a sense of detachment from an actual vocation. In other words, like it's not just that you don't want to overwork or you don't want to work too many hours. I think there's work in the world that you want to do that either your parents' generation or your parents themselves or your environment or even some of your own internal, you're not letting yourself, you don't have permission to do that work. And so you want to protect yourself from, and rightfully so, work that steals life from you. Absolutely. Pay attention to that. Get distance from that. And as you do, what you won't find is your soul just being satisfied in a detachment from work, in a detachment from achievement. I don't think that's what you'll find. What I think you'll find is this desire in you to do work that deeply matters, that makes you want to put in the 80 to 90 hours a week for 2 months. So your body, your heart, your soul, you want to do that work. So that vocational call, some of what we're experiencing now culturally has to do with a detachment from actual vocation, that there are jobs to do, that there are things that need to get done. And these aren't rooted in our souls. They're not rooted in, this is not an expression of who you are. This is just stuff that needs to get done. Justice needs to be achieved. Kids need to get fed. That stuff's true. But if you feel drawn to that because it needs to get done, and that's the only reason you're doing it, that's not attached to who you are. And so, of course, you're going to want to take some steps back to get grounded in who you are. And part of who you are will be expressed in work that makes you want to spend yourself.
Right. It's a great answer. Thank you for that. The heart of the book really centers, I would say, on the word belovedness. And I'd like you to just define that in some way, give us a picture at least of what it is, and then why you have taken it up as the driving center.
I have never graduated, nor do I ever want to graduate from that very simple moment in the life of Jesus in which he hears from the Father, "You're my son. I love you and I'm proud of you. You're mine. I love you. I'm proud of you. I like who you are. You're mine." I've never graduated from that, and I don't ever want to graduate from that. The place that happens in the life story of Jesus is as key as what happens in the moment, which is to say, he hasn't turned water into wine. He hasn't called the disciples. He hasn't announced his messiahhood. He's done none of the things that we would note as the life and work of Jesus. His work then ends up being, I would suggest, an expression of that. This is where it comes from. He also returns to that place over and over and over again in and through his work, where he returns to his beloved center, where he escapes to pray. His work is an expression of his belovedness in the Father. And the thing that he does through and in his work, it's not particularly about the healing. This person just needs to be healed. This person needs to be healed so that they would know that regardless of their life circumstances, they're beloved of God. It's not, there's no mistaking this in the life of Jesus, that it's not just lepers need healing and leprosy is awful, so we need to fix leprosy. No, these are people who are cast out by the culture around them, who feel divorced from themselves, who then feel reconciled in love because of the work that Jesus does. The entirety of his work is an expression of belovedness, and it stems from his sense of belovedness that he receives from the Father. In essence, I just want to live and work like Jesus. I want to, which I want to be rested, not so that I can do work. And I want to do work, not so that I can achieve things. I want to know that I'm loved by God, and I want to communicate the love of God. It stems from belovedness. It returns me to belovedness over and over and over again.
I'm Mark Labberton. You're listening to Conversing. For those who haven't yet read your book or necessarily had an encounter with your other work, I'm curious if you could just give us a window into how that journey has had its inflection points in your own life, this journey toward living in belovedness.
Sure. So a couple stories, I think, probably from the book. The one that comes early is I played a lot of music early, which is part of how I met you, I think, initially was.
Yes, it is. Yes.
There was a musician at the church in Berkeley, and he and I had become friends. And I was invited to do this week-long trip, a mission trip thing. And yes, there's a whole conversation here about short-term missions and all that. This is not what this book is about. But and on the way to Mexico, my role there was to lead chapel services in the morning and the nighttime, and then do the traditional, like, go hang out at work sites while students, dug trenches and did all the thing. So on the way down, I'm informed by some of the leaders. They're like, are you open to being part of I can't remember what they called it. I name it in the book, but it was like the overnight club or the all-nighters club. I was like, sure, what is this? They're like, yeah, well, we don't sleep while we're there. I said, at all? You don't sleep at all? No, we don't sleep while we're there.
For a whole week.
For the whole week, for 5 days. We get together after the last service, we make sure kids are asleep, and then we pray through the night. Now, I'm in my early 20s. I'm just coming into the practice of faith. So I'm like, I need to prove myself to Jesus and everybody. So sure, let's do it. So I do the thing where, like, up in the morning, 7:00 chapel service, visiting people all day, and then chapel service at night, and then praying through the night. Several things happen, actually. The things of note. One is I came to the end of that week, and I had never worked that hard ever. Like, because it wasn't just visiting. Maybe we go and, like, but the relational labor and, again, there's something to be said for short-term missions here, but I was putting the time and energy. I was with people, I was picking up shovels. I was spent by the end of the week. Like, I was done. And I was so ridiculously happy. I had never felt quite like that. I'd been that kind of tired before. Like, I'd been that exhausted before, but I never experienced the kind of joy that I experienced knowing where my energies had been spent and feeling like this is, go back to vocation. This is an expression of who I am. Like, I just spent me. I'm not up 5 nights in a row trying to beat Super Mario Brothers 2, because I'd done that too as a teenager. I just spent 5 days, full days, giving the absolute best that I have on hand. And I feel amazing. That's one. Two, when I lay down to sleep, when I finally got home, it was such deep, wonderful, perfect, just great rest. And it wasn't just because I was so tired. It was because I had spent myself so well. The correlation there was like, I had taken big fat naps before, for sure, and really enjoyed it. But this experience of life, of giving the best of who I am in love to people and to Christ and spending myself fully, had a direct corollary relationship to the depth of the rest that I had. And I've been unpacking that in the rest of the stories in the book ever since. Like, what was that? Because whatever that was, I want that forever. I want to feel that sense of, like, when I lay down to rest, I can sleep as deeply as I need to and as long as I need to, because I'm received and it's okay for me to rest. And when I give myself away, I want to press my foot on the pedal and push it all the way to the floor and give everything I've got. I've been chasing and unpacking that ever since then. It begins there. The last one, the second part is this, and this is the most recent, the kind of bookend to that. I've been doing a lot of this work that I do for this is, similar kinds of work for about 25 years. I've helped plant churches. I've helped pastor churches. I've made records and books. I've developed relationships. I've done a bunch of different stuff. And when it was like 6 or 7 years ago, when that church project began to dissolve, it triggered
the church that you had planted.
The church that I planted
Yes.
began to dissolve. It triggered some unexplored assumptions that I had made about the work that I was doing. Namely, and in short, like that I would ever build anything that would actually last. That's what I thought I was doing. We print books and, well, this will last in the world. Yes and no. As great as anything I might ever do might be, and I don't get to make that decision, but like maybe I make something that's truly great. The point of it would not have been that I build something that actually lasts. The point of it would have been who I'm becoming while I make it. That's actually the thing that ends up lasting. I thought the building a church community, I thought that would be like, I had assumed this is my legacy.
Yes.
This is what I make in the world. And then it went away, and that started to undo, like, I've made all these assumptions about why it is that I work in the world and that I'm going to build something last. And it just doesn't. So that me becoming who I am in my work ends up actually becoming the goal, and who I am is beloved in Christ.
Yeah.
Again, so simple, so like Hallmark cardy once I get around to saying it out loud, but I thought something in the back of my mind had convinced me that I had graduated from "You're mine, I love you, and I'm proud of you." And I hadn't, and I never will. So I won't ever build anything that lasts. It is Christ who builds things that last, and he establishes those in the character, the heart, the mind, the souls of the people he's working alongside and the people he's partnering with to build things in the world.
Grasping that, I think, is understandably one of life's greatest journeys. So I love the way that you've expressed that. And I do think that those true stories are representations of both breakthroughs, illusions, breakthroughs, illusions, breakthroughs, illusions, right? Where you're the lived experience, I'll use again the whirlwind image, the lived experience of whirlwind life, which can be full of so much pain and trauma and confusion, but also so much beauty and joy and celebration and amazement and awe, delight, relish. All those things can be so great. And at the same time, they are woven into a fabric of so many other pieces that are even beyond the ones I've just named or that you've pointed to by your stories. So the constancy of God, the faithfulness of God, the persistence of God, the immanence of God, these are all things that hold all things together, to use Paul's language in Colossians. So one of the things that has been true of your story is that you have, I think, deliberately pressed into working, particularly with young people and young adults, and still do. And we're in a time when I love learning just recently that millennials are now middle-aged. I just love that. That was like the most awesome thing I'd ever heard. That was just like fabulous news that millennials are middle-aged. That was really, really great. So let's not talk about millennials, but if we were to move into Gen Z,
sure,
and the whirlwind that they're in, which is similar and different to the whirlwind that you've lived or that I've lived, take what you're saying and apply it to some degree to Gen Zs. What of the themes of belovedness, work, and rest do you think are that you see as being most needed and an evidence of a desire for among Gen Zs?
I would begin with I'm having this conversation a lot about the amount of information there is, particularly in the mental health conversation around, well, or anything. It's a truckload of information about mental health and wellness. And I'm sort of an in-between space with regards to like how helpful it is for there to be that much information. So like on my podcast, I'm in a series right now. I'm talking to therapists, predominantly therapists, for I think we're doing like 8 or 10 episodes in a row. And one of the primary questions is with the amount of information there is and like the persistence of conversation about mental health, like, is this helpful or not?
Yes. Yes.
Or is this creating more anxiousness?
Yes.
So I would begin with the warning that, like, I don't think we're wrong in pointing out like the difficulty of life and the difficulty of well-being. But just because it is rest or restful doesn't mean it's helpful. Or just because something rescues you from something else negative doesn't necessarily make it a positive. There's a story in the book about I traveled to Germany. This is a number of years ago. And my plan was, because of the time change, by the time I landed in Germany, I wanted to be fully awake. So I stayed up all night the night before. And I got on a plane.
This is a theme
slept.
that we're picking up in your story. Staying up and all that. Yeah.
Exactly. So I fall asleep on the plane. It's 11 hours from SFO to Frankfurt. I sleep the entire 11 hours. And when I, which is fantastic, I felt like I achieved my goal. When I got off the plane and I picked up my 55-pound sack, my back, because I'd slept crooked on the plane, my back wasn't ready. And then I spent the next like 2.5, 3 days in pain. Like, I couldn't get out of a chair. I could barely get out of bed. I'm literally walking crooked, and had to see a chiropractor in Germany, which was a terrifying proposition at the time.
Yes. That combination seems a little scary.
It's a little scary, which is to say, like, you can rest in such a way that is damaging to your soul and to your body. So I don't think we're wrong in noting the dangers of the cultures or the dangers in the cultures around us, the fear of religious authority, and the fear of the abuse of power, or the fear of overwork. I think we're right about those things. But just because it is a respite from those things doesn't mean that the ways we are escaping those fears or avoiding those fears won't also misshape us. Right. So find guides. Find helpful guides. Find loving guides who actually want to listen to your story, who will not just pay attention to you and honor your fears, your concerns, your worries, but also help you eke out your dreams.
Yes.
So that you can figure out what it is you do want.
Yes.
And actually pursue and chase that, so that you can rest well, be challenged by someone who says it might not be the worst idea to actually insert yourself into a culture that is misshapen and be a positive force there.
Right.
So yes, pay attention to the warnings, to the fears, and to the red flags. Absolutely pay attention, but don't be defined by those, because the places we run to from our fears will oftentimes misshape us as well. That would be my predominant teaching for Gen Z.
Let me
folks.
ask a follow-up then. So these categorizations of people in generational groupings is a suspicious cause to begin with. So let me just say that I'm not putting my eggs in that basket. I'm just using it as a way of framing things, because that's often how we understand these things.
Yeah.
And different generations seem, in a certain way, to have common needs and sensitivities. So when it comes to belovedness, in what way did Gen Zs, in your view, need to understand more about their belovedness? Is there something missing, something misdefined, or whatever?
This is a bit of a romantic knowledge, so I'm sure I'm projecting my Gen Xness when I say this. That regardless of anything, your experience of love, of belovedness, this side of heaven will come in. It'll come in perfectly, and you'll experience it imperfectly. That we experience perfect love imperfectly, and that old adage of broken cisterns, and in some ways that's all we're ever working with, and because it's not perfect doesn't mean it's not love. And more to the point, part of what I see in Jesus is that when he offers himself to someone in healing, he asks something as well. So in other words, he doesn't just walk up to someone and say, your hand is healed. He says, extend your hand. Pull your hand out of your cloak and stick it out in front of this entire crowd. Take that risk. Meet me somewhere here. Participate in this.
Yes.
Or take up your mat and walk is another way to do the thing, not just as evidence of your healing, but a way to participate in your healing. Or go wash in the pool of Siloam. There's always like a thing. I'll do this work of connecting with you and bringing you to healing. I'm going to ask you to take a risk, to insert yourself and to participate in this process in some way. Mm-hmm. Part of what it means to experience and live in belovedness is to receive that. And without the active reception, I wonder, and I don't know this, I wonder if there are moments that weren't marked down where Jesus was very willing to bring someone to wholeness and healing, and they just wouldn't receive what was being offered. They wouldn't pull their hand out of the cloak. They wouldn't take up their mat and walk. And then I have no idea what happens to that person. So part of being belovedness, it is not a passive posture. It is an active participation. We have to live into and receive actively our own belovedness, which means taking risk in relationship and in work, in community. You have to take the risks and act into those beloved spaces.
Yeah, which again is to say it's both work and rest.
Yes.
So, Justin, I think you know that I'm in the process of a life transition from having been in the role that I've been in as president of Fuller Seminary to now a new chapter. I'm not thinking of this chapter as being a chapter that I'm at least yet interested in calling retirement. I've retired from being president, that's true. But I actually actively think of myself as a person who is still engaged in work and rest. Yeah. So I'm curious if you were to take the fruit of your book and advise me about how to lean into this season that I'm now in, give me your guidance.
Man, there's this, this is the chapter that jumps out at me, and we'll see if this lands with you, is when I go running, I actually have it right here. I use this headset I go running. It's a little Bluetooth headset. It's like $24 on Amazon. They're fantastic. And once in a while, I will go to I'll get started. I'll go to get started, and my device, my iPhone won't connect with the. It's done it before.
Yes,
it's done it 40, 50 times before. Then all of a sudden, this in some weird conversation between these pieces of tech, they're like, not today.
Yes,
and one of the options that I get is to. It's one of the options. If I go through the prompts in my iOS, it asks me to not just disconnect, but to forget this connection.
Yes.
It'll actually use the word forget this connection. There is a gift in forgetfulness where I don't just get disconnected. We do, you and I both know this. Like there are cats who like go on vacation or they'll go on sabbatical, and it's like a half step away, but they remain in the same postures. They remain in the same patterns.
Yes.
There's something to the gift of forgetfulness, which is a much more complete step away. I mean, that's not even the right word. There's something more complete about forgetfulness. I don't even remember what that feels like. That allows us to reconnect freshly. There's something in that. For you, all these years, talk about the thread that runs through your work. There is this thread that runs through your work in terms of the way you care and teach and pastor. In a next phase of life, what's it look like to find freshness, like something that not because there's something ill or terrible to get away from, but to like re-experience that thrill of like, this is what is next. And right. To like the unboxing of the new thing.
Yes.
So something less than something more than disconnecting, something more than stepping away, something like the deeper rest of getting your soul to forget some of those connections.
Yes.
That's the thing that comes to mind.
Yeah, that's actually very helpful. It reminds me of a lecture that Eugene Peterson gave entitled "Teach Us to Care and Not to Care," and it was exactly what you're saying, which is this freedom of release from having to care in the way that your life and work and so forth has probably sustained in many ways. But in certain ways, we remember and learn to care, but we also need to learn to not care in the sense of,
Yeah.
or not to care, where we're releasing things in a Sabbath-like way. We're releasing things into the care of God, and undoing the sense that we need to carry that concern always.
Yes.
It was a very profound talk, and I remember thinking it was an unexpected liberty, and that I think I've tried to remember. I think it's very consonant with your book, actually.
Yeah, I mean the image, and I'm looking for the way I wrote it in the chapter, but like at some point, you can look in your iOS profile and all your Bluetooth connections, and it's like all of these connections. So like all of a sudden you've got 30, and it's not that they're all bad. It's just that there's so damn many.
Yes.
And in order for folks who work in tech, and I'm not one of them, I just know enough because I break things. Folks who work in tech will let you know, like this ends up being confusing to the software that's running your device. Right. It's like this, it's this one, it's this one, it's this one. It's like it's three of them that are named the same thing. And to actually forget all of these channels so that whatever connection I want to have is simpler, it's clearer. This is where I am. This is what I'm connected to.
Yes.
There is something to being able to no longer care and carry. I love that.
So, belovedness, work and rest. Justin, these are themes that feel to me extremely urgent across generations, whether you're Gen Z or Gen Alpha, or whether you are, a boomer and older, these themes are evergreen, right? They're always, for every generation, important and needed. And what I think I found so valuable in the book is that through the illustrations that you give and through the reflections that you add to those illustrations, you are calling people to a kind of fresh engagement with in a way, old and familiar words, which need to be recast and deepened in our experience in order to be able to actually claim the riches of what it is that God, I believe, is actually making available to us, but which the culture presses so hard in other directions, like the self-curated life in which everything becomes focused on my making my world exactly what I want my life and my world to be. And that, in some terms, to I think a degree that I think the Bible certainly would support, it's like the most extreme version of the idolatry of the individual, the idolatry of our own particularity, the idolatry of our own, quote, identity, whatever it is that we think composes our identity. Yeah. And all of that can be really rich and life-giving, but it can also be extraordinarily distorted. And I think you're trying to sort out the distortions and trying to bring fidelity and, to some degree, resonance about who we are and how we're meant to live in a way that will be healthy and life-giving to us and to the world around us. Absolutely.
And I start the book with a series. I borrow from Buechner's practice of lexicon, where he'll walk through, here are the words I'm going to use, and here's what I mean by them. There are two ways. There are more than two ways to approach this, obviously, but like two of the ways to approach that are, one is everyone else has gotten this wrong. The generation before me has gotten this wrong. This is what it means to me, and therefore it is fundamentally more true. Like, it is more true because I understand it this way. Yes. That's problematic for all kinds of reasons. Or the humble way of saying, these are truths that are bigger than me. I need to be spoken to in a certain way because of the way my soul is shaped. I need I need language that's different for me because of the shape of my soul. And because of the shape of my soul and the shape and my experience of life, I need right now in the season to hold this or to understand this way because of my limitations, my limited experience, my particular moment. Again, back to Eugene Peterson. I'm a particular person in a particular place at a particular time. Because of my particularity, I have a particular need to understand and express rest, work, and belovedness in this way. That doesn't make it more fundamentally true on the universal scale. It just means in my limited expression and experience of life, I have these particular needs. Will you please meet me there and speak to me in a way that I understand? It's young life. It's meeting kids at Taco Bell, not because Taco Bell is the place to meet. It's just where kids are hanging out. And the Spirit will do that, meet you there where you need to be, not so long as, and may we receive that as mercy, as grace. You need this spoken of differently for a season? Fantastic. It is not the whole truth of rest. It is not the whole truth of belovedness. It is not the whole truth of work. But yeah, you probably need some particular things because of your particular expression and experience of life.
Justin, you've given us a great gift again in your book, Sacred Strides. So thank you so much for who you are. Thank you for this conversation. And I hope the book really reaches its audience in a powerful and very, very helpful way. So thank you again for being our guest.
My pleasure.
Thank you for listening. Subscribe to Conversing on your favorite podcast app to listen to new episodes as they are released. And please leave a review. Conversing is produced by Peter Laberton and distributed by Fuller Studio.